Hello, and welcome to the Argyle CFO Leadership Forum. My name is Nick with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout today's sessions, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our moderator, Stephen Tillich, Finance Director, L'Oreal. We're excited to have Stephen and our panelists for a panel discussion titled Finance Talent Focus 101. Welcome, Stephen. Over to you.
Thank you, Nicholas. I'd like to welcome everyone to this great discussion. We will have a very good discussion about the topic of the Finance Talent Focus 101. In other words, how do you optimize finance talent in your organizations? There have been various initiatives over the past couple of years: finance transformation, automation, significant investments in technology, etc. But one theme has been consistent throughout all of that, and that has been talent management. We do have an excellent panel that we've assembled to discuss these topics, and they will be discussed specifically three key questions. How do organizations manage their recruiting and retention of talent? Number one. Number two, what kind of practices do they have to motivate employees and invest in their competitiveness? And number three, how do you ensure that you have the right tools and technology in place to promote upskilling, reskilling, and training initiatives? So those are the three general themes that we'll be discussing. And now I'll turn it over to the individual panelists to introduce themselves. And then right after that, we'll go straight into the questions and start the discussion. Angela, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Dr. Angela Dogan, and I've spent the past 17 plus years in consulting in the area of risk management, GRC, and my passion lies, which is why I'm here today, is I also have a nonprofit, the Global Center for Women in Risk Leadership, where we do help women get into the field of risk management in all industries. Happy to be here.
Okay, Larry.
Hello, my name is Larry Mellon. I'm the tax director and the chief tax officer at Vertex Incorporated, a software publisher. I've been at Vertex for 18 years. I've been a leader in tax and finance areas for over 25 years, and I'm looking forward to presenting with this panel today. Thanks for having me.
Great, welcome. And Tozan.
Hey, good day. I usually use good day, not knowing where time zones are nowadays. Tosa Ali, I currently am the finance director for strategy for Equinix, the data center technology company. I have been in the field of finance for about a decade now, so I think I'm the baby of the group, and mostly focused on strategic finance, FP&A, technology finance, essentially the areas of the business that tend to be tagged with quote innovation around whatever entity. I've been in Equinix for about a year now, and I think this is my second or third panel with Argyle, and it's always been a great discussion, so looking forward to another one.
Great. Well, we appreciate that you're joining the panel, and I'm looking forward to having this discussion now. So let's get right into it. So over the past several years, there have been a lot of changes in the business landscape. We've had COVID, we've had the end of COVID, and a return or a normalization of the business again, and partial return to the office. And how has this impacted talent development?
Anybody? Want me to start?
Larry, you want to start?
Go ahead, Larry.
I'll go. So I think that, as a broad sense, we could talk about how, COVID has certainly changed the way businesses operated. Everybody was used to going into the office. We had people that were remote. We know that COVID made it more 100% remote. with some individuals that had to go office bound based on roles and stuff. And people had to be in there because of roles. So just overall, we all know the steps that have gone through with COVID. And now that, as Stephen said, we are, it's kind of ended. So where we're starting to see some of the stuff now is, what is the dynamic change in business? Is business saying, okay, now they're in the process of saying, let's open up those businesses again. Let's bring people back in. And bringing talent in to do those. So there's probably several examples I could share on that, and we'll save that for later on. But I think that what's happening now is businesses are determining, we're paying rent, we're in these buildings, we need to put people in here. Is this what makes sense? And then you're dealing with the issues of employees are saying, I've done my job perfectly sitting at home. Why do I have to go in? So I think that just that overall overview is kind of where we're at. And I think that either, Angelo or Tosan may have additional comments, or that may be kind of some of the framework for how we're going to answer the future questions is based on that dynamic.
Angela.
I just
Angela, go
want
ahead.
to I just want to comment on something Larry said, because I think Larry's exactly right. The fact that the back to office has increased this year, and it definitely has had an impact. It's had an impact also from the standpoint of, well, if I don't have to go in the office, I don't want to go in the office. And if you're not going to let me stay home when I've demonstrated that I could do my job just fine from home, I'm going to find somebody who will let me stay home. And so I think, that's had a huge impact, especially on the finance industry, period. It's impacted everybody, but really, I've seen the impact in finance.
Toza, do you?
I think the word that comes to mind, COVID has forced intentionality. Gone are the days where you develop talent by osmosis. You watch me, then you go do, then move along. It has forced leaders to be a lot more intentional about how we coach up and stack up the bench behind us, especially since the workforce is dispersed, right? I have a team that is half of my team is with me in Dallas, another half is in Tampa, and I'm messing up my math, but there's another core in Toronto. We're all over the place, right? So there has to be, from a leader's perspective, an intentional effort to ensure that you're bringing your team along and making sure you're pacing their growth appropriately. Now, from a leader to a senior leader's perspective, I've had to be more intentional. My CFO is in Silicon Valley. My boss is in a different part of California. I want to develop myself, right? But the onus has moved more on me, who is looking to develop, to carve out those times, get those relationships going, get those conversations, because those water cooler osmosis moments that we used to happen organically are not there anymore. And I don't think they ever will go back, because the full-time 5 days in office probably is not coming back anytime soon.
So I think it's a great point that it looks like have permanently changed, and things just are not going to be the same anymore. And I would say that especially among the early stage or early career types of employees, the remote characteristics are now going to present certain challenges, such as they have lack of supervision, they have lack of guidance and development, and there aren't those coffee or seeing them at the coffee machine. And so what are some of the steps you can take to mitigate those adverse consequences and ensure that your finance teams are especially the early career finance members, that they are still getting the support that they need, and that they're getting developed, and that the company's investing in them?
Well, I'll start. I think that It's more on what the leader's doing, right? You're talking about how the early person's coming in and has this new way of doing things. They don't know anyway, potentially, to your point. So it's up to the leader. And we know that there are leaders out there who were those type of leaders. And Angela and I talked about this before about leaders that just lead. You know, they're looking at their office to make sure everybody's head is down and doing stuff. And there's leaders out there who are working to develop people and do stuff. So to answer your question, my opinion is it's up to the leader to be educated and changed on how to lead a remote type or early career people versus just sitting with them each day. So I think that as much emphasis that some people who are leaders are looking at younger people, and that's the issue. I think more of the issue is the leader being able to adapt to what's happening in the environment today and not lead as they had in the past.
I think to what Larry said, first of all, there's two types of roles. There's a manager and there's a leader. And in the scenario which Larry gave, you're talking about the need for a leader, but the existence of a manager. And so as a manager of people, we have to decide what kind of leader do we want to be? Do we want to be a manager? Or do we want to be a leader? And I think for those people, that group of people that you mentioned, Stephen, you've got to have some leadership in there. You can't just manage. You've got to have some leadership in there. And, you know, I think for that age group, you really need to be what's been coined a servant leader. You need to have authenticity, humility, compassion, integrity, and demonstrate those things so that you can lead and guide that group and your whole team. It just doesn't have to be that group, your whole team to be their best self. I think you have to make that choice.
And Toza, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think too, for all Larry and Doc just pointed out, you have to have a strategy that is corporate wide, right? If you allow it to just individual people manager or people leader to try and figure things out themselves, at best, the new to career folks is going to get a very discordant experience, right? You're almost at the mercy of if you have a decent leader next to you, right? So Equinix is we have data centers globally and hubs scattered around the world, but there's a strategic hub strategy to seed leadership. I'm probably the most senior finance person in Dallas. Even though only 3 members of my team sit with me in Dallas, I'm responsible for every other finance function that sits with me in Dallas, right? As if I say it, it's similar to what their manager or their leader says. But in order for me to do that, there is a rhythm where we as leaders are meeting, so that I can distill the information that the manager in Canada who has a team in Dallas wants to give to his team. I can represent him or her accurately, right? But I can't do that on my own. The company there has to be a strategy, a culture around that one can build off of.
So when you mentioned that at times you would be at the mercy of a particular leader, and at a different point, you also mentioned that there is a corporate-wide strategy, and let's just call that corporate culture. How important is the formation of a strong corporate culture compared to the personality or the working relationship you have with an immediate supervisor? Like how much can the immediate supervisor shape the experience of the employee compared to having, for example, a strong or a weak corporate culture?
The corporate culture is, I don't care what you put on your vision statements and your cultural strategy and what have you. Your corporate culture is what you experience from your boss. It's almost as simple as that, from your boss and from your peers. That is the essence of it. the good cultures that I have worked in have actually been ground up built
Mhm.
in terms of what is tolerated. Your culture is only as good as what you can tolerate, right? So if you tolerate a bullying boss or you tolerate um, somebody who cuts you off at the knees, takes credit and what have you, no matter what the chief HR officer is doing and trying to cascade downhill, if that negative actions are tolerated, that is the culture.
Mhm.
So the good cultures are the ones who are almost um, maniacal about tracking down those behaviors and stamping it out.
Mhm.
Uh, and hopefully, the folks who tend to rise through good cultures are the ones who are keepers of the flames, for lack of a better word.
I just comment real quick on there, just like something I've always done is I'm never anyone's boss. I'm each person's coworker. Nobody works
Mm.
for me. We work together. You work
Mhm.
with me. If a leader is trying to hire talent and bring people in, you have to say, they all know at the end of the day, I'm the boss, right? They all know you're the person who's giving them raise. They know that, right? But if you're the person who's like, we're working together, if something goes right, we all get credit. If something goes wrong, we're
Yeah.
all wrong. If
Yeah.
you have that culture with them, they're going to work with you forever. So with bringing people in, sharing that that's the way you're going to lead versus I'm the boss sitting at the teacher's desk and you're the students out there, give me work. It's not going to work for you. So
And I
I would
think
say
that
that's
goes
the first thing. Yeah. Yeah.
and I think that goes back to Angela's comment about the servant leadership too.
It does. It does. It definitely does. Because you know, you've got to be, here's how I look at it. And in reference to Tosan's comment about strategy, I'm a firm believer that if the head isn't right, the body isn't going to be right either, right?
Mhm.
It starts at the top. And so if we want to attract talent, okay, if we want to attract talent, we have got to be what we want to see. Period.
Yep, that makes sense.
Period. And that thought process should be a part of corporate strategy, but let's be honest, sometimes it's not. And with that, we just have to be mindful of what is the end goal, right? And how do we want to attract good talent, period.
So that's great. And this brings us into our next portion of this, which is really about what are the best practices for attracting new quality candidates and what are some of the competitive offerings to attract these people. And we're talking about the servant leadership and stamping out bad cultures and having close relationships and kind of an egalitarian mindset, not like a draconian, hey, I'm the boss, you're the subordinate mindset. So what are some of the other aspects of how to really create a company where we can hire the best people and where we're a very attractive employer?
Want me to go?
Hmm.
Anyone else want to go first?
I was
I'll go first. Whatever.
somebody go ahead.
I just think that some of the thing is, as you're trying to bring talent, you're trying to hire talent in there, you have to be clear on what their expectations are. I think there's a lot of times that people go out there and offered, and this is what your role is, we'll figure out what else we have. Now, be clear on what they're going to do. Especially as we talk with younger people that are coming in, we find that we could all talk about how, people who are our grandparents or people who are in their 80s now, stuff, when they worked 40 years at a company, right? We're not seeing that stuff. People are working for short periods of time, more education, more experience, and moving on. So I think that what's clear in bringing someone in is to make sure you understand what they're going to be doing, as well as at least being able to talk to them about what they need to do to advance themselves from the beginning, right?
Mhm.
So they don't say, I'm coming in, this is my job, and this is all I'm going to be doing. Here's what you have to do if there is a company need to move you up. It's not just like if you do this, you're now going to be promoted. It's get them in there, make sure they understand what they're going to do and what things they could do to make themselves advance themselves in the future. I'll let you guys comment.
I think you're spot on with that, because at the end of the day, everybody wants to know the answer to the question, what's in it for me? And I think that we should say, gone is the day where we treat people like they're doing us a favor by applying for a job at our company. There's a lot of options, right? It's challenging. There's companies all over the place. I think we have to be willing to answer that question. What's in it for them, right? And be interested in what their expectation is, to Larry's point. You have to be. And we have a question that's actually one of our questions that I wanted to touch on, because it kind of relates to this, and it was the currently the biggest challenges. What are the biggest challenges, right? I think the proper answer to your question, Stephen, is the biggest challenge. It is the biggest challenge. And I think when we as hiring managers are communicating with recruiters, or the HR department, whatever that team structure is in your organization, about the talent you want, you need to also think about those skills that are not necessarily easy to train. So those soft skills. I was reading an article about what makes a good finance team. And they had 7 things. And those 7 things left me thinking, well, how do you judge if a person has that skill? And I'll just give you a couple. Strategy focused, holistic view of business, emotional intelligence. Like, those are things, some of those qualities that make a good finance team, but how do you look for that? And I think we need to really think about that.
And Toza, do you feel that applicants at companies typically have reasonable expectations about career progression? Or do they typically do a good job informing themselves about the company and the opportunity and come prepared to the interviews? And like, is it, in your experience, generally a good experience to have an interview with a candidate? Like, are the candidates typically prepared, and do they have a good understanding of what they bring to the table, and a good understanding also of how that could be matched up against the opportunities in the company?
So the bullet points Angela Doc just rolled off. Most candidates who would come to an interview process, especially if the interview process is well formed, right? For the certain roles, if it's more of a soft skills kind of role, there's a way you want to set up that interview process. If it's more technical and what have you, very, very quickly you find candidates that weed themselves out, right? It's you've not done the job. You've not learned, right? This is just a job, right? I've actually had a candidate who came forward and went, I don't know what this company does, but part of my interviewing is trying to find out. And the honesty actually appealed to me, right? He was a little bit lucky. But to the attracting talent, we are in a phase where, if my math is right, we have about 4 different generations in the same workforce at the same time. It's no longer gone are the days where you went to a particular school to attract your talent. It's only Ivy or what have you. Now the folks that are competing for the same job position come from everywhere and anywhere and every background, right? And 90% of the interview matrix that we put together is not flexible enough to accommodate that diamond in the rough. So what I've had to do when I'm trying to design for an interviewing panel for a position that I'm hiring for, I the first question I always try and ask myself is, am I trying to enhance my team skill set? Am I trying to cover up for a deficiency
Mhm,
within my team skill set?
mhm,
Because at the end of the day, let's be real, finance is finance is finance. It's
mhm,
a little bit, it's not brain science, right? If you went through a certain educational level, you should be able to deal with it. But if an individual comes to my team and he has more of a controls mindset, and I have more finance partners in my team, that person is actually attractive to me because they bring in something that I'm deficit in, right? So
yes.
it's understanding what you want, understanding
Mhm.
what is out there, and going as wide as possible from a talent pool perspective to get the best options possible.
I often find also that people assume that if they are doing well in their careers or they're doing a good job, that they would get promoted on the timing that they are expecting. And there was a comment made a few minutes ago about how, well, um, the company also has to have a need, and the company has to have an opening. And so it has to be mutually opportune. So there has to be both the readiness on the part of the employee and on the part of the company. And Toza, what you were talking to about some of the skills, and that finance is not that difficult, but sometimes there are areas of expertise that they may possess, such as in internal controls. But that leads me to another topic here about the balance between the soft skills versus the technical skills, and how do you manage that assessment when you approach a candidate or when you're looking at a role that you want to have filled. You may have people that have strong leadership skills that are demonstrated in the resume, but they may be deficient in the technical skills. And where do you draw the line of, okay, well, this person doesn't have those technical skills and is therefore not a fit? Or do you say, I can mold this person?
It depends on what stage of growth my organization is in, right?
Hmm.
Quite frankly, just to be honest, it depends on if I have the time. Do I have the
Hmm.
time to actually train the individual up, all right?
Hmm.
Or does the organization have the learning development pathways already clearly spelled out that can train this individual up? If those
Hmm.
two things are there, then the technical skills are, you know, relatively easy to train up. And especially knowing that the technical skills we use in our function are rapidly evolving. When I came into finance, being able to do a pivot table and pivot table analysis was like the holy grail. If that's what you offer me right now, I'm like, like that's so 90/90,
Yeah.
right? We have more automation and AI and SQL and all of that stuff. But can you sit across your business partner and get what their problem is, and can you
Hmm.
solve it,
Right.
Yeah.
right?
So
That's something I can train.
yeah.
So
So
Larry.
Tosin, my comment, I wanted to comment on what Tosin said, just about the fact that like you having time, right? We
Mhm.
also have to factor in that often the leader that's hiring doesn't know what that person does,
Mhm.
right? They're relying on other
Mm.
people of a staff too. So to your point, yes, you're right. If you're the immediate supervisor of that person, you have to have time to sit with them. But often you're the hiring manager, hiring person for your department, but you don't even know what that person does. So to your point, some of those steps have to be in place to make sure, to Stephen's point, is it we're molding them because we want them because they have a lot of education and talent, or is it the fact that they have skill set and understanding? A lot of that is based on the leader and what their role is to that person that's being hired. So I just wanted to add that comment there.
Okay.
And that would change depending on the level, right? If you're coming in as an analyst, I need technical skills
Mhm.
heavily.
True point.
If I'm
Yeah.
hiring, yeah, if I'm hiring a manager, well, there should be assumption that you have a decent enough
Yeah.
technical platform. But more than anything, can I throw you into a room with the chief supply chain officer and you can go solve his issue, or
Mhm.
her issue? That
Mhm.
becomes more important to me depending on the level of career you're at.
Angela.
I actually agree with everything everybody said, but directly to the point, I'm of the mindset of Tosan. If the organization has learning and development tracks, if they have educational opportunities to grow in the technical knowledge that I need my team member to have, I'm more importantly to me, I'm thinking about, would they mesh with the team? Are they culturally a good fit? Do they have those soft skills I need them to have to be able to, number one, work with the team, but also at the level that my team is at and who we have to be in front of? Can they present themselves in the manner that I could throw them in front of the CSO, the CEO, right? Because I can train you on the technical. I can get you training. I may not personally have time, but I'll get you training and I'll fight for you to get it. So it's more important to me for those to have more of those soft skills.
So you did mention learning and development tracks. And so I want to talk a little bit about these kind of career development opportunities or these programs, and if your companies offer those, and how you would go about selecting people for those. And then after that, let's get on to some questions from the audience here. But first, let's answer this question about that career development track and how you go about selecting people for those. Go ahead, Angela.
To be honest, I don't know if I necessarily have a plan. I think, I don't have a roadmap or how I select people to go through that track. If I have learned to follow my gut, and if my gut tells me that this person is a good fit, but they're missing, and I'm just going to pick this out of the hat, they're missing advanced Excel skills, or they're missing this particular tool set skills, right? Then that's not gonna stop me from hiring them. And they're gonna be one of the first people that I put in on that track. And I think that is what really moves me to be able to determine who should be focused on this learning track, who do I not need to focus on this learning track because they know the skill and they can go and do this, and build that culture that actually works together. So do I have a written down formal roadmap? No.
So Larry, what are your thoughts?
I think that, to Angela's point, I think that, having those plans, is beneficial. If you're someone who's been a leader and you're hiring multiple people, you should have a path for what that person has to have. So as we talked earlier with Tosan, it was like, do we have a need for somebody? Do we want a need for somebody? I think having those plans as a leader, again, do you have time to do that? Developing that plan to have it so the person sees that you're not just like, yep, I'm hiring this person, come work for me. I don't know what's happening with your future. And I think that's where we have difficulty in the retention side. I came here, I'm working, there's no career path. There's nothing that says I can work towards this. Why am I here? Other people, we know that there are people who work for us and with us that are happy. Just leave me alone. I'm fine doing my job for 10 years. Let me just do what I'm doing. I do it well. And there's other people who are every other day saying, how can I advance? So I think by us having a plan that has versatility on how we're dealing with the person to build it will be beneficial to us. I think the plans work, in my opinion.
Okay.
And you get that plan by conversations, right? And I'm not talking about quarterly conversations. I actually think it should be more frequent. I have a monthly meeting, one-on-one with everybody who reports to me, and I call it the "What can I do to keep you?" meeting, right? And I started a friend of mine who had worked somewhere for about 20 years was leaving, and she said, when she was leaving was the first time she heard that question posed to her, what can we do to keep you? Of course, it's too late at that point. So I initiated a monthly, what can I do to keep you? Because then the individual will let me know, I want to try this kind of finance, or I want more exposure to this person, or like Larry said, I'm good. Just leave me where I am. I like what I do. It's easy. Roads, leave me where I am. And that's okay.
So let's answer one question right now. There are several there, but one person has asked, we've struggled to attract quality candidates for a while. Is there any advice? So that's a tough question, because it's always tough to get great talent. So that has been consistent, and I don't know if that's gotten worse. Is the sense that has gotten more challenging, or has it gotten easier because, for example, people can work remotely, which means that you have actually a broader field of applicants to choose from. So there's a lot of shifting dynamics behind this question. So who has some thoughts on that?
Larry is. I will jump after Larry.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Toussaint, go ahead.
I'll say a couple of things. One, I think expectations. I think too many companies expect to hire at an entry level somebody who has 10 years experience, like, or can do the work of someone who has 10 years experience, like expectations, like setting expectations. Two, clarity of the job description. I have seen a lot of JRs, job recs out there. And at the end of it all, you're looking for Superman of finance who can do it all for 70 grand. That ain't happening, So
Well,
just a very specific clarity, expectations and clarity.
yeah. Well, remember, you're the leader hiring someone. So you think anybody who's younger has learned something better than you have. Like you think that, right? I went through and we were doing a college intern program. We're bringing somebody in for finance. And I had like 20 applicants and only one had Excel skills on their resume because they only took one small class of it. So in my mind, they're going to come in with the greatest thing. They're going to have all this knowledge. They're young. They're going to school, but they don't. So and I agree with you, Toussaint. And with the question about, quality candidate, your definition of what is quality. To Angela's point, am I getting somebody with my gut that's going to be a best fit because we gel when they're going to do the job, or there's someone who's got a loaded resume, still good, but making that call? So to answer it as a quality, it says quality candidate. I think a lot of it depends on what your needs are and how you can develop that person is going to be how the person will help you.
Angela, any thoughts?
I mean, I'm sure you guys can see me shaking my head and pointing my fingers because they are spot on. You define quality, right? Because quality to you, Stephen, may not be quality to me, and vice versa, right? So you have to define, first of all, what does quality look like to you? And then convey that to the recruiters so that they can advocate finding you someone who looks like this quality model that you have displayed or conveyed to them. All right. The other thing that I want to touch on really, really quick is a question in the chat, because it kind of flustered me. And that is about the remote worker and how you ensure that critical finance data is protected. Yes, there are tools you use. Yes, there are security tools. I don't think this is the right forum to be able to intelligently answer that question, other than to say, that's when you go to your information security department and you talk to them about that, because you can lock down devices and limit what talent does. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But as far as quality talent, the last point I want to make is something that Toussaint brought up, is the job description.
Yeah,
I have seen a lot of job descriptions that want executive level performance, but want to pay analysts money. Let's realize that's not gonna mesh. And so we need to make sure that we align salaries with job descriptions correctly.
S- We, so we do have 10 minutes left, I believe. So, and about the comment about job descriptions and also having the correct expectations, people need, also the applicants need to understand what their capabilities are. And I think that's one of the biggest gaps in the whole process. They need to understand it. And when they join the company, they they need to work with the company to ensure that the job description is very well understood and that the tasks are clear and that the company is providing the right tools or technology in place to train them to do the job properly and also giving an opportunity for growth. So one of the questions that is key here is how do you ensure that you have the right tools or technologies in place for this upskilling, reskilling, and training, both new and existing employees?
I'm
Larry?
sure there's, oh, go ahead.
No, go
Yeah,
ahead,
Tucson,
Toza. Go ahead, Toza.
I think obviously most mature companies have some kind of learning and development part, usually sits under HR. That is essentially their job is to market test constantly what is the skill sets for different functions that are needed, right? I made a joke about Excel pivot being kind of like old school right now. Now everyone is on automation, Alteryx, SQL, and quite frankly, very soon AI will be running all your financial models. And what is left will be how to interpret it. So what I would rather prefer to that is not just the accumulation of learning and development resources, but the curation. So that if you, and you can do it with AI now, if you put in, I'm a senior analyst, I want to be a tax manager in 3 years, it carves out your path for you. Like, here are the resources, it curates a curriculum for you to go ahead with. And in conversation with your manager, a good manager should be able to carve out time to enable you go along that path, especially if that's what you're looking for.
Larry, any thoughts?
Yep, I think you covered it all.
Angela?
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Angela.
As I went to hit mute, the screen just disappeared.
Okay.
What I was actually saying though is that I think Tosan hit it spot on. But I would also ask a follow-up question to that question and that is, what type of tools do you think you need? Right? Are you talking about tools to do the job, or are you talking about tools to equip someone knowledge-wise to be able to do the job? Because that wasn't clear to me.
So one thing that I've noticed is that obviously employees want to be trained, they want career opportunities. They obviously are primarily there for a salary. But I've noticed also that what they're looking for has shifted quite a bit over the past, let's say, 20 years. And especially around the areas of ESG, or you have the social responsibility and the environmental responsibility. And I know that it's very important to most companies that they demonstrate their social and environmental responsibilities. And the new employees, the young employees, the younger generations are very keen to ensure that whatever company they go to work for, that company has the values that they also aspire towards. So do you have any thoughts on that? And so it's not that cash is no longer important, it's just that other things are becoming also prominent in the decision space, in the list of things that applicants are looking for.
Absolutely. I'll give you an example. When I post MBA, I had about 5 offers, and the company I chose was specific. I'm Nigerian. I chose the position because it would have given me the ability to be the strategy manager for Africa and the rest of EMEA. And the idea of being able to build something in my home country was appealing. right? It wasn't quite ESG, but it I actually left money on the table to take that position because that spoke to something that's there, you know, I'm there to be. Um, what again, back to the clarity of communication, because a company can position to try and address every ESG and or value system out there from an applicant. What needs to happen is during the interview process, that's a great question to ask.
Mhm.
You know, what is outside of the role, what is driving you towards this company?
Yeah.
What do you see yourself adding to the brand? What can we do for you? You know, what can we partner on? And you tease those questions, those answers out, just to, and you can tell, an experienced interviewer can tell what is a canned robotic answer. You can tease out what would bring the passion to the table, which is something you can't quite pay for.
Mhm. Angela or Larry, do you have any other thoughts on that?
So my final thought really in relationship to that would be, you're right, the younger generation and more people, period,
Mhm.
are concerned with the organization's values, their culture, ESG. My advice to an organization would be, you may have to show some responsibility for ESG from a compliance perspective. However, walk the walk.
Mhm.
You can say that you have these programs and you do this and you do that, but employees and people, especially younger generations, can see the fakeness. They can see
Mhm.
that, oh, we just did this because we had to, we had a compliance requirement,
Mhm.
versus, no, we really feel
Mhm.
passionate about our ESG program. So I would say just be authentic
Yeah.
in your cultural values.
Yeah. And Larry, any final
Yeah,
thoughts?
I think it's just a balance between that. Like, we all know that when you're going through, we've talked a lot about the leader side of it. We're going through that whole interview process. It is you're in there trying to get that job and you're doing everything the company wants, but then it also becomes a flip in the middle of that interview. We're like, okay, now you want me, right? So there's that whole dynamic of you selling yourself and then the company wants you. So there's that mix between there. So I think ESG, just how things are changing, technology, how people operate, it becomes, it's all in that interview process. It all comes down to respecting the person that you're working for, respecting the
Mhm.
person you're working with,
Mhm.
and just a straight across the board. Here we are, we're transparent. This is what we're going to do with you. What can you do for us, and come to a mutual agreement.
Exactly. And I think on a final thought, all of this is designed to lead to happy, motivated employees that are productive for the company, that have hopefully a good tenure with the company. One thing that I have noticed is that tenures have been shrinking, as I don't know what the causes are, but it appears that that employees are often leaving for other opportunities, and that the kind of the old school model of going to work for a company and retiring at that company, there are very few companies where that culture still exists. Um, but I think that it's important to ensure that the employees are motivated and they're properly trained, they understand their responsibilities, and the company is giving them good opportunities for advancement, and also paying attention to the value system that is very important to a lot of people. So with that, are there any final comments? We have 1 minute left.
I'm good. Thank you for having me on the panel.
Okay, Angela, any final thoughts?
Yes. Promote servant leadership
Mhm.
and define your qualities for good talent, and you will attract them.
Okay, thank you. And Toza.
Great.
The finance function is changing and evolving rapidly.
Mhm.
Stay nimble.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Back to you, Nick.
Well, great. Well, thank you all for such an insightful panel discussion. That was awesome. And I want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. This officially concludes the Argyle CFO Leadership Forum. Thank you again for joining us today and engaging in our content. Have a great rest of your day.